listening to the Interactome, a podcast by a group of young researchers who want to connect you to the world of science by sharing their stories and perspectives. Just in case their bosses are listening, they want to remind you that the opinions expressed here are their own. They also want to remind you not to take anything they say as medical or professional advice, as they are not doctors. Not yet, anyway. Stay tuned about that. And, without further ado, welcome to the Interactome.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Interactome. Before we begin tonight discussing our topic about graduate school, we have an announcement, which is very, very exciting. We'd like to officially welcome a guest, or a former guest who you may have heard. You may have heard his voice in the intro. The wonderful Sam Pickle, also known as Pickle, is officially joining us as a full-time podcast member. He is someone that we're very excited to have on the team. He brings some new additional expertise that none of us have, and he is our editor extraordinaire. So we're very excited to have him. Welcome, Pickle. And
thank you, Joe. I could go ahead and just give a quick little about me. Hi, I'm Pickle. You may have heard me before. I'm the voice in the intro. Professionally, I do software engineering. I got my master's in computer science at UMass Lowell, and I'm just really happy to be here. I think it'll be really fun to not only participate, but kind of work behind the scenes too. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I guess getting right into it, the topic of tonight is our just graduate school. What is it? Why would one do it? What's the point? How does one get to doing it? I guess we can kind of just open with, for everyone, what is graduate school in your opinion? We could just kind of throw it out to everyone here.
Yeah, so I would say graduate school, at least pursuing a PhD, is a PhD is a terminal degree, and I think the word terminal is very telling as to what a PhD actually is. So essentially, it involves you becoming an expert in a very small academic niche or research niche. And so it's really an opportunity to create new knowledge and do research that has never been done before. And this is probably one of the most exciting aspects of a PhD to me personally.
Yeah, for me, getting my master's was kind of, and it's a little different than what some of the others may have gone through, but for me, it was kind of an opportunity to further practice and expand my knowledge in the computer science field. I feel like while it is something, you go and study for, a lot of computer science comes from practice. So the additional time being able to learn a new language or kind of reinforce what I've already learned was particularly helpful to me taking that next step, going into a full-time career, and that extra little bit of practice and industry knowledge brought to you by people who have practiced and studied is, I think it gives you a leg up in some ways.
Yeah, I'm doing something a little different. It's a combined MD medical doctorate and a PhD degree. And so we've kind of already talked about the goal of a PhD, but the medical doctorate is primarily designed to help people become physicians who kind of understand human health and how to take care of people when they are dealing with illness. And that is kind of a whole different sphere of things. It's a little different than the more research-oriented fields, because it kind of has like this humanistic caring aspect to it, which we can definitely get into more later. But I think that's one thing I think that we should point out is that these are definitely not all the graduate school degrees that one can do. There are plenty of others out there. For example, I know a few people who are doing a doctor of veterinary medicine, which is different than a medical doctorate. And like we can share our experiences about like our graduate degree experience, but we definitely are not knowledgeable about other degrees. So just a little caveat to keep in mind when listening to us. Take our words with a grain of salt, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I can share a little bit about my graduate degree experience thus far, and hopefully this can be helpful to anyone who has similar interests. So I am actually in my first week of starting my PhD in chemical biology. Whoop whoop. Very exciting. And so I just want to talk a little bit about why I chose to pursue this PhD program, and what it's been like so far, which isn't much yet, but it's still been exciting. So there were actually multiple reasons why I chose to pursue a PhD. So essentially, I've really enjoyed research. Throughout my undergraduate degree, I was able to participate in a few research opportunities where I really got to understand what it takes to be what it takes to be in the lab 24/7. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully only 8 hours in a day for 5 days a week. But really what a full-time research job looks like. And through these experiences, I came to really appreciate and get excited about research. And so a PhD is really, as I mentioned earlier, an opportunity to deep dive into a really specific niche. An opportunity really to do research that hasn't been done before and that you're passionate about. And so I think it's really exciting to be able to be an independent researcher, right? To have your ideas develop and be able to be in a space really where you can pursue the questions that excite you. And I think, Maia can talk a lot more about this, but I really do believe that a PhD teaches you skills inside of the lab and beyond the lab that are really applicable to all sorts of careers afterwards. And so I definitely want to pursue a career where I need a PhD. So that is also one of the reasons why I did this. And what has it been like so far? Well, it's been really exciting, a little nerve-wracking, as anything is when it's new. But I'm going to pass it on to Maia because she knows a lot more than I do.
Great, wonderful. Thanks, Lauren. As Lauren mentioned, I am in a PhD program right now, and I am currently in my 4th year, which is crazy to me. So been here for a while, and hopefully I can have some helpful or insightful things to share with you all. So for me, I guess I wanted to add on another thing about what doing a PhD means to me is that not only has everyone else mentioned that this is an opportunity for you to get really specialized knowledge, but I think doing a PhD is so different from what one would experience in their undergraduate education. So instead of kind of like learning all of the knowledge that you have in your lectures or read in the textbooks, now you get to become a part of creating that knowledge. And that is especially exciting, but also really difficult to do because like no one has ever taught you how to do that yet. So something that I kind of have been reflecting on during my years in grad school is that doing a PhD in my experience has taught me how to be pretty critical of information that I come across. So in like my undergraduate education, I would like do my best to learn everything that my professors gave me. But now as a graduate student, at least in my program, people are transitioning students into being able to like question material that you're presented with. And what do you think about it? How could you improve it? And what would you do next to answer and ask more questions? So that's what I would say is like a thing that sets apart grad school from an undergraduate education is making that shift between a consumer of knowledge to a producer of knowledge. So hopefully I feel like I've sort of gotten a flavor for that after 4 years in my PhD program. But I should also mention that I'm doing my PhD in molecular biology research. So what that means for me, and in my program specifically, since I feel like that's the best I am most informed of to offer, is that my program is very research-based. So instead of attending a lot of lectures and going to classes, what people in my program do is conduct research all day long. So typically, for a biology PhD program, at least from my experience, is that when you apply, you'll first take some time in your first year to find a lab that you're interested in conducting research with. So some programs have rotations, which is a term for a 2 or 3 month stint in a lab where you try out the research, you get to know the people that are in the lab, and see if the science and the people are a good fit for you. So in my program, we had 3 rotations throughout the year, so 3 tries to see different labs in campus that we were interested in. And then at the end of our first year, we picked our lab homes and picked one lab to do our thesis research in. So yeah, that's kind of like the first part of the biology PhD experience. And then after that first year, it differs per program, but there are teaching responsibilities. So if you remember graduate student instructors or teaching assistants from undergraduate school or undergrad, they are typically grad school students that are fulfilling their teaching requirements. So you get to be on the other side of the classroom, disseminating knowledge to the students. And then after that, typically in PhD programs, you take something called a qualifying exam, and they're also kind of referred to as different things in different programs. I think some people call them prelims or preliminary exams or something like that, but it's basically just a big exam at the supposed halfway point of your PhD. Where you, it can differ from school to school, but you typically submit a research proposal for the rest of your research plans for the rest of the school year, for the rest of your graduate school career. And then you kind of have that vetted by a panel of professors, and they give you feedback. And then with that, hopefully you're good to go to research for the rest of the time. So as a 4th year, I've done my teaching responsibilities and I've taken my qualifying exam. So now I'm just trying to get the good research done to put together a really cool dissertation. So something that I didn't quite know about grad school before is that after the first few years, it can be kind of nebulous and unstructured. So compared to undergrad, where you have very defined semesters and exams, in grad school, it's kind of like you do your research, and then you're just kind of done at some kind of like unspecified time, because research doesn't often follow a linear path. So for different graduate schools, there are different requirements for completing the program and receiving your PhD. So for example, a common requirement is that a student will publish their dissertation research or at least have a manuscript to put out on an open source archive on the internet so that others can read it, since that's an important part of the academic process, which is sharing what you've done with the rest of the community. So with all of that, though, there's always like input from your fellow like professors in the program and your classmates in your lab. So you're part of just like this big community that's just doing research and producing knowledge and sharing it with the world. But yeah, I guess that's basically a PhD in a nutshell. And yeah, how it's been going is okay. It is challenging because I feel like as I've gotten further and further into grad school, I feel like I can't predict anything that will happen. So whether that's good or bad, I think I've just gotten very comfortable with like rolling with what life gives me.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
I think that I just want to talk about something you just said earlier, Maya, about grad school being, at least during a PhD, becoming really unstructured and having to deal with a lot of setbacks and still pushing through. What do you think was the most important kind of steps you took before starting your PhD that have helped you to handle that? Do you think that having research experience and kind of knowing what it's like to do research, or was it talking to other people who've done a PhD, or was it kind of just being a process of dealing with things as they come?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that definitely having research experience before grad school is a must, and it is the most, I would say, accurate predictor of what grad school is like, because you'll be spending a lot of your time in the lab conducting research and thinking about science all the time. So I found it really helpful to explore research opportunities as early as I could in my undergraduate career. So poking or sending emails to like random professors and asking them if like they had a spot for a summer in a lab, that kind of thing. Getting to learn techniques, and even like sometimes finding a position in a lab is kind of random at times. You just kind of have to be in the right place at the right time. So even taking advantage of teaching labs at your undergraduate school and learning how to do different techniques, I think is very helpful, because that'll be your day to day. So I think trying to get into a culture of research early on is a good idea, and it'll let you know whether or not doing this for the next 5+ years is a good fit for you. And honestly, like learning how to roll with the punches has been a process, since grad school is very different from undergrad in terms of like structuring and like how much kind of like how do I say this? Like in grad school, like you don't have a lot of indicators that tell you whether or not you're doing a good job, because you are meant to be an independent researcher, and oftentimes like research does not go linearly. So maybe you have like a year or two that like is pretty dry in terms of research, but then like everything amazing happens like in your last year. So it's kind of like different compared to undergrad, because you have semesters and exams and quizzes to tell you that, oh, you're on the right track. So that is something that I wish I knew a little bit more about before. But yeah, it has been a process to kind of like learn how to roll with the punches. And honestly, I think it's a great transferable skill once you get out of grad school, because you become very adaptable and creative in your problem solving as a result.
And resilient, I'm sure.
And resilient, yes.
Yeah. So I just want to, before you wrap up your section, Maya, I have one more question for you that I think would be really helpful to anyone listening who's interested in grad school or about to start grad school. You talked about mentors being really important for the success of your program. And I know that the program I'm in is also very flexible and there's not a lot of structure. So I'm wondering how you found... Basically, how did you find your mentors? How did you go about that? Because I'm sure a lot of people would get value from your experience.
Yeah, so finding a good mentor, it is quite important. I totally agree for grad school. And the way that I found mine was through like a variety of means. So the rotation program that I talked about, where you try out different labs for a few months, that was really helpful for me in determining what kind of mentor worked best for my personality. So for example, like I am a kind of person that really values like constant feedback. So I know if I'm like kind of on the right track or not, or if I'm like barking down the wrong path or something like that. And I really enjoy having someone to bounce ideas off of. So my ideal mentor would be somebody who is like available and willing to talk with me pretty frequently. So I figured out that there are different styles of mentors that you can encounter in grad school, and probably like a mentor that is like away or traveling a lot at conferences or was really busy and didn't have time for meetings was probably not the one for me, but maybe a really good mentor for somebody else who kind of likes to work on their own more, have more time to explore like what they think they want to do and that kind of thing. So also another good resource for finding good mentors is just talking to a lot of the people already in the program. So I think grad schools always have like a lot of opinions about like who's in the department and their stories and experiences with them. So if you find that a mentor has been coming up a lot in conversation, and whether or not people are saying or having positive or negative experiences with them, you can take that into kind of like your judgment and checklist of what a good mentor would be like for you. But of course, those are other people's opinions. So the best way to find out is to try to build a relationship with them at first. And a good opportunity to do that is in those trial rotations.
That's super helpful. So essentially, you have to know yourself well, or get to know yourself well.
Yeah, I did a lot of
important.
Yeah, and I think you'll probably do this too, Lauren. But at the beginning of grad school, I did a lot of soul searching, and I was like, "Who am I? How am I going to thrive?"
I am going through that exact process right now.
Yes,
and yeah, it's exciting and a little nerve-wracking for sure.
Yeah, I think that's another cool part about grad school is that you discover a lot about yourself and what you're capable of doing.
I'm excited for the challenge.
Woo! Yeah, this is actually super helpful for me to hear too, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm doing a combined MD and PhD. My path is a little bit different, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But before we get to that, maybe I should talk a little bit more about like the medical degree. And so really what it is, we kind of talked about it already, but the main goal is to train you to be a physician who can take care of patients. And eventually, after you're done medical school, you'll go on to maybe specialize in something. Maybe you're become a doctor who's focused on cancer or heart disease or things like that. I should also mention, before getting into the nitty-gritty of it, that there are two kinds of medical doctor programs in the United States. First, there's the allopathic medical doctorate, or MD, which is the one that I'm doing. And there's also the doctor of osteopathy, or DO, which I'm actually not doing, and therefore do not have a lot of experience to talk about it in. A DO is generally, to my knowledge, similar to an MD, but one additional thing that they do is they learn a lot more about like physical manipulations of the body, like things more along the lines of like massaging or things like that to help really treat your ailing muscles and things along those lines. Whereas like allopathic MDs, like the one that I will become, are more focused on therapeutics and things along those lines. But yeah, so in terms of what an MD is, it's really helping teach you what you need to know to take care of patients. So everything from the biology to how do you enter a room and talk to someone in the exam room? How do you listen to what your patient is trying to tell you? Like all those kinds of things. And so it covers everything from like hard sciences, like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, to just what's good body language. So it's a very every school is different. Every medical school is different, but my experience so far has been generally along those lines. Admittedly, I'm only in the third week, so I'm really just starting out. But this has been my general understanding of medical school for a long time. In terms of structure of the standard medical degree, usually what you'll do is kind of how it's been for a long time is that you do sort of 2 years of like medical school classes where it's more like lecture based, and you're learning about everything from like cell biology to like what does the cardiovascular system look like and how does it work. So you generally get all the book knowledge that you need to get into your clinical rotations in your third year, maybe into your fourth year as well. And then you'll have in your fourth year, you'll have like additional clinical electives. So while rotations are like you're basically where you're required to go and work in a specific kind of clinic. So maybe you're working in internal medicine, which is kind of just general like medicine, taking care of adults. And then you might find yourself working in obstetrics and gynecology, which is a lot of women's health, to even surgery, like just suturing and things like that. And then afterwards, you might do electives, which are not necessarily required rotations, but maybe you rotate in a specific department that you didn't have a chance to before. So yeah, and then after that, all of this is preparing you for residency, which is kind of after you get your medical degree. You are already a doctor, but you're going to a specific department to really learn how to like really work well in your specialty. So like there's actually a long road after the medical degree. There at minimum like 3 years, as long as 7 years afterwards of training before you're a full like doctor who can practice on their own. So definitely something to keep in mind if you're thinking about becoming a doctor. It's a long road, but it can be quite an enjoyable one if it is right for you. I guess why did I choose this? I've had a lot of personal experiences that have kind of reinforced the fact that I want to really just kind of be there to help people when they have these really, really challenging clinical situations. When people are like, seeing my mom and dad grow up and like deal with their like they had some medical challenges, watching how difficult it was for them, and same thing with my grandparents. I really felt like I wanted to in the future be there to help people in their time of need as well. In the same way that a lot of the doctors that I saw did for my parents and grandparents. And I think that for me, that's really the main driver of why I want to be a physician. I really enjoy like kind of in contrast to the research aspect of some graduate degrees. This graduate degree will enable me maybe to do research. I'd have to pick it up on my own if I just did the MD. But this is more focused on being there in the immediate moment for individuals when they have a health or a health issue, and helping them take care of it in the moment. You're really working on the individual level, like face to face with people, instead of like the conceptual level, trying to understand or uncover new knowledge. So it's definitely different from a PhD in that sense. However, because I am crazy, I'm also doing the PhD. And so I felt like for me, to prepare for medical school, I had to kind of just to see what it was like. I actually followed some doctors around and shadowed them to kind of just, I basically joined them when they were working in the clinic. And one thing that I saw there was a lot of times they had things that they could do to help patients. But for example, I shadowed in a neuro-oncology clinic, a brain cancer clinic. And with a lot of brain tumors, they have things that they can do to help, but it's very, very challenging, and there's a lot that can be done to expand the kinds of treatments that we can give to patients. And so one thing that I thought was like, wow, like I want to be a doctor and help in these kinds of situations, but I also kind of want to push the boundaries of what we can do in the clinic. And so that's kind of one reason I'm motivated to research. And that's motivated by my experiences in the clinic, as well as just stories that my parents have shared with me about like their own experiences and why they're facing these kinds of things. So for example, my dad was a first responder at the World Trade Center when 9/11 happened. And he's one of the people who's been told like, hey, you might have had some chemical exposure, so we're going to have to keep an eye on you and do some screenings to make sure or to check and see if you're developing certain kinds of diseases like cancer or lung diseases or things like that. And so that led me to think, okay, well, why do these chemical exposures cause these diseases? And if I can understand that, maybe we can think about like preventative treatments. And so that is another motivation for why I want to research. And so I'm also trying to delve into eventually a subset of or specialize in a research field as well, similar to Lauren and Maya. But my focus, just because I'm also doing the medical doctorate, will be more like oriented on kind of uncovering new. The goal will be to eventually be someone who can kind of bridge the clinic, like see issues that patients are dealing with, and then bring it back to the lab and say, hey, how can we fix it? How can we research this and understand it, and then bring what we learned back to the clinic to help improve what we can do for people. So yeah, in terms of structure, an MD PhD degree is a little different than a MD degree or a PhD. I will actually be doing 2 years of medical school, and then I'll be taking a break to do a PhD, and I'll condense it down to 4 years. So it's a lot of work, and I don't necessarily have as many teaching responsibilities as Maya or Lauren will, and the research project that I will do will probably be more like specifically focused on human health, and its scope may also be slightly smaller. However, I'll still have the opportunity to learn all the scientific thinking skills, and most people in MD PhD programs will publish research papers by the time that they're done their PhD. After that, I will, after my 4 years of doing PhD, I'll go back into the MD degree and kind of pick up where I left off, doing more like clinical rotations and things like that for the last 2 years before heading to residency. So it's a long road, 8 years, and you're kind of flipping back and forth between degrees, mostly doing one or the other at different times. But for me, I've had enough experiences to tell me that like I really couldn't do one or the other. And for what I really want to do, I really do need both clinical expertise and intensive research expertise. And I'm willing to take the time to develop that. I guess that's really all I have to say on that as of now. But I'm sure I'll learn more along the way.
How do you feel about your experience in school so far? Because I know you just started.
Oh yeah, it's honestly awesome. Like I'm already thinking about what research lab I might want to rotate in first. We actually do our rotation in the first summer, or between like year 1 and year 2 of medical school. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. So talking to a lot of researchers and stuff like that. So that's exciting. But one thing I'm really focused on right now is just a lot of our classes, like learning cool biology. I learned this week that there's fat in our bones. I forgot about that. But our bones do indeed have fat. And it accumulates as you get older, which is kind of interesting. So I'm learning a lot about just biology. And one thing that the medical school I'm at does is they actually invite patients to come in and talk to us about the medical challenges that they're facing. So today we had a patient come in and talk to us about their disease and what it's like to live with it, and what we as aspiring physicians can learn from them. And so that's been really powerful. These patients have taught me a lot already, and I'm really looking forward to learning more from them in the future.
Yay, that's great. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, this has been super interesting to listen to. My experience has been a lot different. For context, I went to school, computer science, got my master's degree, and it was a lot more, in my experience, like undergrad than it was to everyone else who's spoken tonight. I didn't really go into much research. There was kind of exploration, some paper writing, depending on the course. But there were some courses that were just more interesting that you might not be able to explore in undergrad, for at least in the computer science program that I was in. A lot of that was foundational knowledge. So before I get into it, I just kind of want to say that I know this is a little bit different from what the others talked about. This is a little bit more, I don't know what the best way to put it is. I think the easiest way is to kind of talk about how it's not exactly the same kind of science. It's a little bit more in the engineering kind of field. So forgive me if you're more interested in the biology side of things and the actual
Computer
sciences.
science is cool too.
It's cool, but it's different, and I'll be the first to acknowledge that. But yeah, so this my experience is a little bit more go in and practice and learn about, like, get some foundational knowledge first, right? For people who haven't done programming before, a lot of early undergraduate computer science is we want to learn about these languages that were very close to the bare metal. We're talking like assembly languages and like the original C language. And then we're going to build up on top of that with C++, which is like C, but we have a lot more conveniences built into it. And from there, it's like, okay, what can we do with C++? One of my projects was making the game Snake, right? But that's all the undergraduate stuff. Yeah, it was cool. But the graduate level kind of goes, all right, so we already know that you have this foundational knowledge. Here's kind of more advanced topics. Yeah, you learned how to write if statements and stuff, but have you ever interfaced with a database before? Okay, so here's a SQL course. You may have used Python in undergrad or in your own free time, but have you ever considered using it in the context of a neural network and kind of see the medical applications of that? Data mining is a really big industry. How can we kind of drill down into huge data sets and kind of extract relevant information? So those are the kind of topics that my school went into at the grad level. They kind of wanted you to explore a bunch of different things. I didn't really declare anything specific in computer science. I know some people might have a discipline. For me, it was just kind of general. There are 4 categories. There was like security, there was robotics, there was foundational. I forget exactly what the last one was, but they kind of wanted you to bounce around different topics. And unlike a PhD program in other disciplines, and I guess in some other disciplines, masters as well, there wasn't a requirement to write a thesis or a paper or defend anything. You had the option to if you wanted to. It wasn't a requirement, and I had elected to just take a few more classes, and that would substitute the need for that. So that's kind of like an overview of what computer science grad school was. Again, like the TLDR is, it's more of the same.
The stuff that you specialize in sounds really cool and advanced, and my mind is exploding because I feel like computer science is like such a valuable thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging, right? I felt like every day that I was doing something, I was learning and failing and learning from that failure. And that's a really good thing. That's something I learned really early on, is that failure isn't a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing if you can learn from it.
I think that's a great lesson that will likely apply to all of us. Sorry to butt in there.
Oh,
But
yes.
I like that statement.
I agree. Yeah, I think in pretty much anything, if you're learning from your mistakes, then you're learning the right way. Um, yeah, I guess the last thing I would say on the subject is it's a lot of practice, computer science. It's a lot of muscle memory, getting familiar with certain areas and just doing it. It's a little bit less look at your textbook, memorize, oh, when was the original C language implemented, kind of a thing. It's a lot more functional. So I think that kind of explains the different approach. There's a little bit less opportunity for research. You can certainly get your PhD in computer science, but that's usually a little bit more reserved for if you're going to be a professor, if you're going to go and teach people. Maybe you'll get some experience in industry and go back and do the research. So wasn't really a requirement for the job, that at least the jobs that I was looking for. But kind of like I said in the intro, it does kind of give me an edge. You get your foot in the door. I found coming from the context of now I'm working full time, applying for jobs. That little master's that you have on the resume can get a lot more people interested in reaching out to you. That said, it doesn't necessarily help you in the interview process. Software engineer interviews can be very ruthless in some ways. You got like half an hour and you got to show your stuff. So you don't really even need a master's degree for that. But if you want to get your foot in the door, it's a very, very good way to do so.
Stay winning, Pickle. Stay winning.
Heck yeah. One question. What got you interested in computer science and doing a master's?
Forewarning, I'm sure there are a lot of people in the audience that can relate. A huge nerd here. I had always grown up playing games and using the computer, and technology has always been a big part of my life. And when it came around middle school, high school time, I was really starting to think about, okay, what do I want to do after high school? I've been going through the motions of waking up, going to class every day. What do I actually want to do with the time when I'm an adult? And the answer always came back to technology. It's what I surround myself with. It's what I know the best. Does that mean I want to go into design? Does that mean I want to develop games? What do I want to do? And I found that while I wasn't the best math student, I really liked the aspect of math that has like the problem solving component, like figuring something out and getting the right answer. That's awesome. But kind of like the failure thing I was talking about before, that doesn't always happen the first time. You make mistakes. You learn a new concept. You try to apply the formula and you don't get the right answer. And you have to go, well, why? You go back, try to figure it out, work through it. Oh, okay. And that kind of kickback of, I figured it out, I got it, was really my favorite part about math. And going into some of the high school computing courses that my high school offered, it was more of that. Except now you could actually kind of see when you did something right, it showed up on the screen. And that was kind of rewarding in and of itself. So I guess it's a little selfish. It's a little self-fulfilling of, I like this feeling of I did good. I kind of like the idea of learning from my failure, turning this, what can be associated as a big negative, kind of flipping it into a positive. And that's pretty much it.
Super cool. Maybe we should pivot a little bit to kind of sharing with our listeners what it's like to apply to these kinds of programs if you're at the point where you're thinking about applying. Maybe we should chat a bit about the PhD and master's first. I can cover the MD side of things a little later.
Yeah, I could speak a little bit about the timeline for applying for PhDs. So the application process takes, I would say, a few months. So the standard timeline, at least in my experience for the biology PhD programs that I applied to back in the day, were that in the autumn, so late November, you typically submit your applications to different schools. So unlike applying to college, there's not really like a common app that's available that you send to all the schools for your graduate programs, but each school kind of has their own. So you submit an application which consists of a personal statement, so why you want to go to grad school, a research statement, which is basically like a summary of the research that you have participated in before applying to grad school, and amongst a few other things like transcripts and CVs and all of that good administrative stuff. And then you typically hear back from the grad school PhD program in a month or two. So in my experience, since I submitted applications in late November, I heard back in December whether or not I was selected to come interview for the grad school program. And I did not know this, but the interviews are kind of like a whole affair. So the graduate schools will invite their prospective PhD students to come visit the campus. And you get to meet all the professors, meet your potential classmates, meet the people that are currently doing PhDs there. You get to talk to them about what it's like and ask them all the questions that you have. And the interview component is basically just a short talk you give about your research that you give to professors who are interviewing you to see if you are a good fit for the program. And it's also a lot of fun, I think. Depending on like the school or program that you interview with, they will often try to show you like what life is like on the campus or in the surrounding city. So when I was interviewing, I like visited a lot of like museums and did a lot of like fun, like outdoorsy activities with the interview cohort, and like drank ate a lot of like free food and like got wined and dined, so it was really fun. And they pay for you to do this, so they fly you out and pay for your hotel and everything. So it was a great time, I think, and I especially enjoyed it because I just got to talk about my research and everybody had to listen to me, so it was a great time, at least for me.
Yeah, I can agree with Maya, except ours was a little bit different, and I will be interested to know how it will be going forward because of the pandemic. But I actually got interviewed over Zoom. So all the schools that interviewed me over Zoom, which honestly was quite nice in a way because it meant I didn't have to travel a lot. And then what they did is that if you got into the school after the interviews, then most schools, not all schools actually, but most schools would invite you back for what they called a second visit. And so I think that's a great structure because you don't have to travel for the interviews. And then once you've done the interviews and you're in, you get to go visit. So there's no pressure. And yeah, you still get wined and dined. So it's great. And I hope that they do that going forward because everyone that I spoke to at least really enjoyed the way that it's set up now. So hopefully it'll stay like that, or they'll do everything in person. Who knows? But I know no one really wants to do everything over Zoom.
Yeah, it was a little different for me, actually. There were some similarities with like statement of purpose and putting in a resume. But I had started my journey before the pandemic. I graduated undergrad 2019. And something that UMass Lowell offered, and I know a lot of schools do this, but in particular, they had a +1 program. So if you had the idea that you were interested to go to grad school right after undergrad, or you could defer about a year or so, you could sign up for the +1 program and just kind of pick up where you left off. I think it was interesting because there was a little bit less. You guys are lucky with the wine and dine. My school was just like, you want in or not? And it was very much just like, well, okay, if this school's offering the +1 program, they already have your information. They kind of know who you are already. There's a little bit less going back and forth. You just kind of have to prove that, you were a good student and that you were serious about it with a statement of purpose and your resume and your grades. And there were some benefits to that. I'll probably talk to it more in a little bit, but being able to know that a lot of your credits will double count was incentivizing to me. Being able to complete a degree in a year instead of 2 for the master's was also an incentive to me to just kind of do it, because I knew I was the type of person that when I was done with school, I would have difficulty going back. So do it now, get it done while everything's still fresh in my head. That was kind of my approach to it.
Yeah, I guess I'll cover the medical school side of things. It's we could have a whole episode on this, but it's a pretty involved process. So if you're like me and you kind of want to apply as early as you can so that you maximize the chance of getting in. Basically, a lot of medical schools will have like sort of rolling admissions, sort of, in the sense that like if you apply earlier, they're more likely to give you an interview in a lot of cases, not all. So I actually, after a few years of getting some clinical experience and research experience and making sure that I knew that medical school was really for me, I filled out what they call the primary application, where you have your letters of recommendation and your grades, your transcript, like your just general personal information, like kind of a list of some of the activities you've done. Like I actually mentioned some podcasting stuff that I was doing, things like that. And also in this application, you include a personal statement. However, this personal statement is a little different from a lot of like standard personal statements that you hear about. This one is really about who you are as a person, why do you want to be a doctor, and what kind of doctor do you want to be. Not necessarily like, oh, I want to go into oncology, or oh, I want to go into surgery. Like it's more, how do you want to carry yourself as a physician? Like what values do you want to bring to the profession? And so I wrote that, and I actually I checked the MD PhD box, like on this application. You say, do you want to apply to MD PhD programs too? And you click yes if you want to do that. And so I actually had to do 2 extra essays. The first was why MD PhD, like what do you want to do a combined degree? And the second was a kind of like what Maia mentioned, a research statement where you just describe, okay, I did this research project. Here's what I did. Here's what I learned. Like, and then go on to the next one. And so I submitted that. I started writing just because I am crazy. I started writing in about February, and I submitted it in June of 2021. And so some people started a little later. My pre-med advising program at my college, my undergraduate college, encouraged us to apply or to start writing in February. So I did that. I submitted my application, and that application went to a bunch of different schools. I just chose every school that I wanted to go to. And then about a month later, maybe a month and a half, I got secondary applications from almost all of those schools. These applications are kind of like a supplement to the primary application, where you answer questions that are specific to that school. So since I was doing the MD PhD, in addition to the standard MD questions, I had a few additional ones related to research as well, like who might you be interested in researching with if you came here, like things along those lines. And so I submitted those, and that was absolutely brutal. Since I was working full time as well, it took a long time for me to finish all of them. I was working all the way from like July through like October, which so it depends on how many schools you apply to. I applied to a lot. But once I was done that, I started getting interview invites. And so normally like my invites were all virtual, same as Lauren's. And so I would hop on the computer and hop on the Zoom, and we'd talk about why I want to be a doctor and why I'm interested in coming to this school and things like that. I'd also, in addition to these medical school interviews, I would have interviews with different research faculty members at each of these schools to talk about why I was interested in doing research as well. And so I had that additional component. And that went all the way through for me, my first interview was in November. Some people got interviews as early as September if they submitted their application like very, very early. Like the earliest you could submit it was like the end of May, I think. But yeah, my applications or my interview season went all the way through from November 2021 until February 2022. After which I started getting acceptances, and I got my last acceptance in March of 2022. And I then went to kind of see different schools. They did pay for me to come out. Normally they don't pay for med school students, but since I had the PhD component, they did. I got to see what schools were like in person, talk to people there, and then decide and lock in by the beginning of May of 2022. And now I'm here. So that's really my experience so far. Pivoting yet again, maybe we should just chat a little bit about what is grad school really for everyone. And I want to put this out here to the rest of our team, see what you guys think.
Well, I guess I can hop on. There's one avenue that I was thinking first and foremost is, do I want to take on more debt for this? That was always something, the finance side of things was always kind of present in my mind as I was thinking about this. I kind of thought of it as an investment. I know that going that little extra step going for grad school can result sometimes in a higher pay when you're looking for a full-time career. That was something that was in my mind. I have a couple notes here that I wanted to highlight on that. A semester of undergrad for me, and this will change from person to person. Everyone's financial situation is a little different. For me, undergrad was less expensive per semester than graduate school. And I think that people would probably expect that. One positive, I guess I'll say to that ended up happening in my experience was that all of my graduate tuition was covered by federal loans. I didn't have to take out any private loans for that. Whereas undergrad, there's a limit. So about half of my undergrad loans were federal and the other were private, because they only covered me up to a certain degree. So there was a higher threshold for that. It's something to be aware of if you're pursuing a graduate degree.
Yeah, in my experience, and it's actually something I did not know before applying to grad schools, but for biology programs, PhD programs in the US at least, they pay you to attend, so you receive a stipend over the course of the whole year, and the stipend can increase, hopefully, as time goes on. So you receive a stipend that compensates you for your time for the research that you're doing, and also I know other programs also have kind of a system set up, but you can take on more classes to teach, and that'll also bring in additional income. That being said, I do feel very lucky to go to school and receive something in exchange for going to school. That's the first time it's ever happened for me. But I do want to say that, depending on your financial situation, the yearly stipend can fall short of what you might need to pay for pay for your expenses throughout the year. As grad school stipends are kind of infamously not great. And of course, it depends on your situation. So something I would highly recommend that you do when you're considering applying to biology PhD programs in the US is really consider the area's cost of living and the stipend that the school offers, and see if it is compatible with you, and if you can get by with it. So it might look like some schools offer more or less than the others, but the value fluctuates a lot due to the area's cost of living.
Yeah, I think those are all really important points. I think also when you're thinking about graduate school, whether it's a master's or PhD, I think, like we mentioned before, you really need to do a lot of, I think, inward searching. That's probably not the best word to use, but I think it's really important to understand why you want to do it. If you need a PhD or if you need a master's for the career you'd like to do, or if you don't, understand that it's a time commitment ranging from 4, 5 to 8 years. And I think, when you're thinking about all of these things, it's important to talk to people who've gone through it. At least that's what I found really, really helpful. Whether that's people who are in the middle of their PhD or master's or MD program, or have completed it and now are in the careers that you want. So one of the pieces of advice that I got was look around you, look at the people that you want to be like, and ask them how they got there. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, and for the MD degree, things are a little different. Normally, for the 4 years, it's not uncommon for people to take on hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Medical school is absurdly expensive. So this is something that you should definitely keep in mind. However, it is often, not always, but often easier than one might think to pay it off after medical school, when one is starting to earn a salary as a physician. This is not always the case, but so it's really important to keep that in mind and really consider the financial aspect of it. Additionally, for being a physician, it's a real responsibility. People look to you to really be capable of helping them make decisions that are really going to impact their lives. And so you really it's something that while Obviously, I'm not always going to be super serious all the time as just a person, as a physician. I really do need to be serious about the responsibility and understand the responsibility that that is kind of sort of vested in me to take care of other people. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind as well. And it's a long road, and you're always learning. So and it's a very intensive career. Burnout is not uncommon among physicians in terms of just doing so much work that they just get really tired. So definitely keep that in mind. And if you do choose to go down the path of a physician, think about other aspects of your life that you might want to keep in touch with. Yes, Pickle?
Yeah, I just want to tag on to that, particularly the part where you mentioned burnout. That was definitely something I was only in grad school for about a year, but that is something that I struggled with throughout the experience. It's just sometimes the work can really pile up, and even if you stay on top of it, it can kind of be weird in other ways. Like if you're working on the weekends too, right? You work Monday through Friday on all your grad school stuff, and then you're like, well, I'll get ahead on the Saturday, and then your life starts kind of slipping away, like your personal free time, because you're just constantly in grad school. I can do this better. I can do a little bit more research. So I think it's really key to take time for yourself and slow down. Like you're gonna make it. Don't let yourself burn out, because it's a really important time in your career if you've decided to go for a graduate degree. So yeah, don't let yourself
absolutely. I think that's absolutely true, regardless of what you're doing, and just in general, even if you're not doing a graduate degree. The one financial thing I want to add for MD PhD is that generally those degrees are paid. So for me, for all 8 years, I'm going to have a stipend as a graduate student. Instead of paying in money with like a standard MD degree, I'm paying in time. So because my program is 8 years long. And in this case, MD PhD, you definitely don't want to do it because it's a free MD, just because it's a really long road. So I would definitely keep that in mind and make sure you enjoy both research and clinical care.
Yeah, I think everyone has shared hopefully some really, really helpful advice for all the listeners. And so one of the last things we want to talk about is firstly how to decide on a program. And I think some of the key factors are obviously the areas of research you're interested in, and look to programs that have faculty doing the kind of research you want to do. The location, you're going to be living there for 1 to 2 years if you're doing your master's, probably 4, 5+ years if you're doing your MD PhD or your PhD. And so I think that is super important. And then obviously with that goes all the financial costs that you want to consider when living in, for example, New York City versus Utah. Those are going to be two very different costs of living, and probably also two very different stipends. And so I think, for some people it's more important to consider the cost of living. So yeah, just I think about all of those. And then we also wanted to go over some useful resources. And so Maia, could you share with us the resources that you found helpful when applying to grad school?
Yeah, so when I was in undergrad, I didn't have a lot of, I guess, like in-person resources besides just like the one grad student in my lab that I could ask about what grad school is like. So in addition to like the few people that were in grad school that I interacted with, and they had great stories to tell me, and also like oodles and oodles of helpful tips for how to apply and what to expect. I found actually seeking out people's experiences on blogs and Instagram and Tumblr, telling about their journeys through graduate school to be really, really helpful. So there are a number out there, even if you just type in like grad school in like Instagram or TikTok or whatever, you'll find a lot of people documenting their journeys. And I still kind of like look at those accounts today because I want to be like, ooh, what are they doing in their grad school journey today? So kind of getting like a sneak peek at someone's daily life during their own personal blog was really helpful for me to kind of like see what grad school is like on their end. Does anyone else have any other resources they found really helpful?
I mean, I completely agree that the internet is a wonderful place for resources, because I actually went to an undergraduate institution. There were no grad students. And even when I did my research in undergrad, I didn't interact with grad students. And so for me personally, I really had to firstly get out of my comfort zone by talking to people and reaching out to alumni of my undergrad institution who did PhDs to ask about their experiences. But slightly less daunting was just searching on the internet. And there are tons and tons of videos through the NIH and actually many other like undergrad institutions that'll upload info sessions they do for their students or similar videos along those lines. So personally, yes, the internet is an amazing tool when trying to tackle this whole process.
Yeah, just really quick. The advice I would give would be if you have any peers that are already in the graduate program that you're looking to do, talk to them, talk to your TAs, talk to your professors. One thing I found really useful was there was a grad school day, like a fair that they held on like a Saturday at my school, and that was very informational, kind of laid everything out. So if your school offers that, definitely take advantage of that too.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm gonna just echo everyone's points. I think the most valuable thing for me was just talking to people, getting to know as many people as I can, just as early as I can, and it's really, for me, that was really the biggest thing. In addition to all of these resources that everyone else has mentioned already, that and also just kind of as we've mentioned throughout this whole audio piece, getting your hands dirty in terms of like maybe learning to code or going and shadowing a doctor to see what it's like, or trying to get some time to work at a research lab as an undergraduate. Things along those lines to really see, is this what you want to do? And also preparing you to show that you've indeed tested whether this is really what you want to do and that you're capable of potentially doing it for when you apply. Yeah.
And I think one last amazing resource is that we are a resource for you, dear listeners. So if you have questions about grad school, what it's like to apply, more questions about our own experiences in the biology, like life sciences, PhDs, MD, PhD, computer science, masters, all that stuff. We are really happy to help you through it, because that's what we're here for. We'd love to interact with you and build connections and help you get to where you want to be and demystify the whole process, because it's not extremely obvious at all when you're first looking into it.
Yes, I cannot echo what Maia said with any more enthusiasm. Really, we are such a big resource, and all of us here are more than happy to share our own experiences and what we know to the best of our ability, because honestly, I think I'm correct in saying this for all of us, that we wouldn't have got to where we are without the help of other people that we turn to.
Yeah, and if you're interested in getting in touch with us, you can shoot us an email at I believe our email is interactomedia@gmail.com. And we also have our Twitter at the Interactome. So feel free to message us directly on there or tweet us, whatever you'd like, and we'd be happy to help out how we can. And with that, I think I guess we'll see you next time for another episode of the Interactome.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.